This is me reading, and sometimes misreading, one of my own articles or essays from extrapolations.blog, which I wrote in October of 2021. Maybe sometime I'll read the others, but if you're interested in reading them yourself, you can do so. The address to go to is just extrapolations.blog. From Mr. Anderson to Carl Sagan. What you know, you can't explain, but you feel it. You've felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about? So said Morpheus prophetically to Neo. In The Matrix, which was released in 1999, and every time I remind myself of that, it still boggles my mind. And there is a picture. Through the wonders of HD TV, you can zoom in and you can see that the passport that they chose for Neo at that time, which was in our future then, was 11th September 2001. Coincidence or prescience? You be the judge. As you can see, we've had our eye on you for some time now, Mr. Anderson, said Agent Smith to Neo in the movie, very creepily. You are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. Again, chillingly, what Morpheus said to Neo in the Matrix movie. I'm aware that recently there have been people who have said that Carl Sagan, who sounded to me very much like Agent Smith, and I have a vague feeling that the actor Hugo Weaving, I think his name was, who played Agent Smith, may have based his voice or decided to channel the attitude that Carl Sagan had and ended up sounding a bit like him. Very strange, futuristic kind of a voice, at least futuristic from the perspective of the 1970s and 1980s. So I'm aware that a lot of people recently have said that Carl Sagan was a part of our collective mind control predictive programming operation for everybody who was born in, let's say, Generation X. I don't know whether it was intentional or if it might have been just an organic aspect of our life imitating art, imitating life feedback loop, which they've set up wittingly or unwittingly, which has almost in the manner of a self-sustaining runaway nuclear reaction threatened to engulf us all now that the control rods have been removed. But either way, it is uncanny how Agent Smith's meticulously monotonous tone of voice in The Matrix appears to be modelled on Sagan's disarmingly rhythmical vocal cadence, and that the visual effects of space in his 1980 TV series The Cosmos were perhaps designed to hypnotically implant some false ideas about space or space travel into our fertile little minds. If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe, said Carl Sagan. There's a lot to ponder on in that. Now, I certainly was enthralled with the cosmos when I was a kid. I loved to listen to Carl Sagan speak. His reassuringly calm words felt like a father's protective arm around my shoulder. His eminently sensible explanations made me very optimistic about a wondrous future which I anticipated, the first truly modern age, where X marks the spot of a new generation with Coca-Cola, effervescence, and united colours of Benetton, holding hands around the world towards our shared destiny. Cosmos is a Greek word for the order of the universe. It is, in a way, the opposite of chaos. It implies the deep interconnectedness of all things. It conveys awe for the intricate and subtle way in which the universe is put together, said Carl Sagan. I believed that the future was a grand, expansive vista for us, the Generation Xers, where we would be empowered to solve all of our problems, which I presumed were essentially centred around a lack of sufficient technology. I believed that if I could refine my knowledge of science and engineering, that I would make my contribution to the world by inventing new electronic machines or by cleverly thinking of useful applications for existing technology. These inventions would make life easier for us, more enjoyable, and ultimately make us happier. Of course, I had naively made the unconscious assumption that all of our most complicated problems were to do with the physical world, and that if we could solve all of those scientific and engineering problems, our psychological issues would be so insignificant in comparison that they would evaporate like morning dew in the radiance of our technological brilliance. It seemed naturally self-evident to me that in solving the problem of our lack of material modernity, our society would be able to shake off the shackles of any vestigial, superstitious, religious beliefs. Finally free from all those years of mental subjugation, I supposed, we could then concentrate on living wonderful lives where we would all be happy together, collectively focusing on the big issue of how to expand our civilization, now united in our technological sophistication, into outer space. Here's a picture now of Carl Sagan in outer space. Not really outer space, he's only on Mars, still within our galaxy. No, really, he's with a model of the Viking lander in Death Valley, California, which, according to NASA history, touched down on the surface of Mars on July 20th, 1976, from where it dug soil samples and sent back pictures via a 20-watt UHF ultra-high-frequency transmitter with a 5-megabyte tape drive for storage. Little did I know, that's the oft-repeated cliched line, isn't it? On which the story hinges. Little did I know that the biggest problem facing human society was the same as it ever was. An insufficiently weighty anchor of common sense with a tenuous grip on a crumbling moral bedrock. And that once religion had been removed as a steady mooring for people's minds, a lack of sufficient technology was the only thing preventing them from sailing this rudderless ship into the abyss. And here's a jolly picture of Carl Sagan laughing breezily among some futuristic-looking greenery. From the 1980s perspective, of course, in introducing me simultaneously to skepticism and to wonder, my parents taught me the two uneasily cohabiting modes of thought that are central to the scientific method. And I agree with that. That seems perfect to me. Science is more than a body of knowledge. It is a way of thinking, says Carl Sagan. I have a foreboding of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time, when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the key manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide, almost without noticing, back into superstition and darkness. That was from a book which was published in 1995 called The Demon-Haunted World: Science as a Candle in the Dark. And you might say to yourself, my gosh, how did he know that this was coming in 1995? How could he have seen it? Did he have a crystal ball? No, it was as obvious then as it is now, but still nobody ever does anything about it. In retrospect, it seems almost as though we have been hypnotically lulled, like the Indian python named Kaa did to Mowgli in Disney's The Jungle Book, into accepting a bright white future, which at first glance appeared to be what we had excitedly anticipated, only to realise to our horror that our 21st century landscape will now be rendered clinically clean, and the human life forms within its grasp have been made cold and sterile. Although the constricting python Kaa is portrayed as being an adversary to Mowgli in Disney's 1967 animated adaptation of The Jungle Book, in Rudyard Kipling's original story, the snake saves the human boy from primitive and violent monkeys. The serpent is perhaps then neither representative or of good or evil, but instead, with his hypnosis, he indicates the knowledge of the underpinnings of the human mind. This light of information is neither good nor bad, but like a child with matches, it may be dangerous in the wrong hands. Yeah. People are curious creatures who are both malleable yet resistant to change. And the older we get, the more stuck in our ways we become. Yet so often we may become consumed with a sense of obligation to compensate for mistakes of our past. It's possible that Carl Sagan originally thought he could paint a picture of enlightenment for us, primitive monkeys, in the hope that we would elevate our minds to the heavens. But on seeing how carelessly we played with our new technologies, he may have decided that the best thing he could do would be to appeal to our sense of self-preservation and try to warn us of the danger we were in. Here's a picture of him in 1988, while he was a professor of astronomy and director of Cornell University's Laboratory for Planetary Studies, having some kind of conversation with two employees of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention at the CDC's Roybal campus in Atlanta, Georgia. It wasn't until quite recently that I discovered that Carl Sagan had a certain characteristic, which unfortunately has become in itself enough of a reason for anyone who has been noticing recurring patterns, to make them wonder about and be skeptical of his motivations and intentions. Nonetheless, regardless of whether he was actively aware of an orchestrated plan which he knowingly played his part to further the objectives of, or whether he was simply perceptive enough to be able to anticipate the dystopia which the terrible confluence of human stupidity and selfishness would lead to if left to run its course. He said and wrote a lot of things which have turned out to be instantly recognizable as being a valid assessment of where we are now and how we got here. The cosmos is within us. We're made of star stuff, he says. And here's the sort of Zen Buddhism, New Agey religiosity, maybe statement of his philosophy. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. Maybe is all I can say. Maybe. But where does that get us now, in the here and now? One of the saddest lessons of history is this. If we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We are no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. Again, that's from his 1995 book, The Demon-Haunted World. Science as a Candle in the Dark. And who, listening now in the year 2023, would disagree with any of that? So he definitely seems to have predicted the current junk science disaster. But did he play his part in the downfall of science? Did he play his part knowingly or unknowingly?
We live in an age based on science and technology with formidable technological powers.
Science and technology are propelling us forward at accelerating rates.
That's right. And if we don't understand it, by we I mean the general public, if it's something that, oh, I'm not good at that, I don't know anything about it, then who is making all the decisions about science and technology that are going to determine what kind of future our children live in? Just some members of Congress? But there's no more than a handful of members of Congress with any background in science at all. And the Republican Congress has just abolished its own Office of Technology Assessment, the organization that gave them bipartisan, competent advice on science and technology. They say, we don't want to know.
What's the danger of all this? I mean, you know, this is not the thing that...
There's two kinds of dangers. One is what I just talked about, that we've arranged a society based on science and technology, in which nobody understands anything about science and technology. And this combustible mixture of ignorance and power, sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it? And the second reason that I'm worried about this is that science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along. It's a thing that Jefferson lay great stress on. It wasn't enough, he said, to enshrine some rights in a constitution or a Bill of Rights. The people had to be educated, and they had to practice their skepticism and their education. Otherwise, we don't run the government. The government runs us.